Good morning to all. Thank you for being here with us. Today is an important day because we are starting an effort and giving this structure to an effort that has been a long time coming. I will start by defining the name of the effort that is soon to begin. The name of the effort is Poder. The reason why we decided to call it Poder was because Poder has two very important meanings. One is power, having power and being empowered, and the other is to do, to be able to do and to execute. And this is very important because although it might not seem like a very happy note, the truth of the matter is that for the longest of time, the people of Puerto Rico, whether in the island or in the United States, have been living in a state of powerlessness, in a state of inequality, and that needs to change. Puerto Ricans are proud U.S. citizens. We've been so for over 100 years. We have one of the highest per capita military rates in the nation. We believe in the principles that govern the United States of democracy, freedom, and rights. And being strong believers in that, it is an unfortunate limiting factor that still in the 21st century, there is over 3.5 million U.S. citizens that, although we are U.S. citizens, we don't have the power, el poder, to vote directly for those in federal Congress and for the presidency. And this has been, as I stated, a long time coming. Over the past 100 years, Puerto Rico has established a strong relationship with the United States, but it hasn't quite finished that trajectory. And in the past couple of years, we've been speaking about this. We've been showcasing this. But for reasons beyond our control, the message did not penetrate. It was not very many fellow American citizens knew for a fact that we were actually American citizens as well. Not very many knew that Puerto Rico is the oldest, longest-standing territory in the world and the most populated. But then a certain set of things started happening. In the past couple of years, before even our administration started, Puerto Rico had been marred in fiscal and economic chaos for over a decade and a half. We had been seeing the increasing effects of the lack of economic growth, poor fiscal management, and as a consequence, the significant exodus of many of our people precisely to the United States. Having gotten to a very critical point, Congress then decides to implement what they call Promesa. Promesa is a project that enables an oversight board for Puerto Rico, but also is supposed to do a few other things. It is supposed to give Puerto Rico a path to economic prosperity. It is supposed to allow us to enter into the open markets once again. And it is supposed to be there to support the policy of the government of Puerto Rico so that we can be effective moving forward towards the future. Fast forward and almost coming into our administration, Congress not only enacted this project, but also submitted a report establishing some of the critical needs for Puerto Rico moving towards the future that Congress had to make sure it enacted. Those included economic reforms, such as earned income tax credit, tax considerations when an overall tax reform would be considered, amongst others. As our administration started and we started working with some of the most aggressive reforms in our history. We were optimistic about what was going on, but always recognizing that some actions needed to be taken in the federal government so that we could be as effective and that we could build that new Puerto Rico that we had committed to our voters that we were going to achieve. Along that ride, and about 8 to 9 months after our administration started, not only were we facing an economic storm or a fiscal storm, but we actually had to face 2 natural storms that changed the path forward for Puerto Rico, that caused major devastation, and that for the first time opened the eyes of many of our fellow American citizens to the situation in Puerto Rico. The devastation, the greatest devastation in the modern history of the United States. The impact, many families did not have homes. They had to leave Puerto Rico. The economy stalled, and we needed to find a path forward with that. Throughout that process, many congressmen, many senators came to Puerto Rico. The president came to Puerto Rico. Vice president came to Puerto Rico. And they saw firsthand the damages that were occurring. Not only did elected officials came to Puerto Rico, but also the national and international media came to Puerto Rico. And they were able to showcase the extreme damages, the limitations, and the help that we needed. As the story unfolded, so did the previous story of powerlessness in Puerto Rico did as well. Many people started wondering, what is this Puerto Rico? Who are these citizens? Are they American citizens? And based on scientific data that we have coupled, prior to the storm, only about 20 to 25% of our fellow U.S. citizens knew that Puerto Ricans were actually U.S. citizens. After the storm, over 85 to 90% now know that the people that reside in Puerto Rico, the U.S. citizens in Puerto Rico, have the same citizenship that they do in the States. Then a follow-up question came after that. Why, if they are U.S. citizens, why is the treatment different? Why are some of the observations that we're seeing in Puerto Rico we are not seeing in Texas or in Florida, which also had to grapple with some natural disasters of their own? And then the evidence started piling up, and we used every opportunity that we could to reiterate that we were proud U.S. citizens, but that in Puerto Rico, we did not have the same rights as those U.S. citizens that live in the States. That it was not only a matter of being Puerto Rican or not, it was a matter of any U.S. citizen. Might have been born and bred in Florida or Nebraska, that moved to Puerto Rico, would lose those rights, and that any U.S. citizen that was born in Puerto Rico could take a flight over to Florida or New York or anywhere else and gain those rights. And people started wondering what that meant. People started asking, why in the 21st century does the standard bearer for democracy have this sort of caveat between what should be an equal citizenship for all and what turns out to be a first-class versus a second-class citizenship? During those first 3 months after the storm, we were proud to receive many of the congressmen and congresswomen, senators, and leaders that came to Puerto Rico. They all stood up in a podium like this, and they all pledged their help and their commitment for the people of Puerto Rico. They said that they would do anything within their power to make sure that the people of Puerto Rico would get all of the help that they could get. Within that span, tax reform was being evaluated. And you may be in favor or against the final product of tax reform and its philosophy. But I want to tell you what happened with Puerto Rico. Because of Puerto Rico's particular territorial consideration, Puerto Rico is treated as a foreign country for these tax purposes. And thereby, when the new tax reform came to Puerto Rico, came to the United States, Puerto Rico was levied an additional tax. Now, we warned for about 2 to 2.5 months, all of the senators, congressmen, all of the leadership, that this would have a devastating impact in Puerto Rico in the worst possible time. At the moment where they all pledged that they were going to help Puerto Rico. And at that juncture, and I remember very clearly, during the end of December of 2017, we were hopeful that reasonable minds would prevail, that a commitment to the people of Puerto Rico in their toughest time would move forward, and that at worst, you would leave Puerto Rico as was, and that at best, we would get some sort of consideration in the tax front so that we could spark our economy forward. Unfortunately, the opposite happened. And again, Puerto Rico was levied a tax consideration that means about $2 billion within the next 5 years of economic loss for our island. At that point, it dawned on me, and it was very crystal clear. If in our toughest time, if in the moment where everybody saw that Puerto Ricans needed help, if at the moment where the world stage was being observed in Puerto Rico and everybody would have understood that we needed a helping hand, not a handout, a helping hand to push our economy forward, and we could not get it done, then there is no other alternative for us than to get organized, get structured, get out the vote, make sure we identify those folks that are friends of the people of Puerto Rico, and by the same token, make sure we identify those that have opposed items and policies that are in the best interest of Puerto Rico. And that is when this notion of creating an organization comes along, where our hope is that it's a nonpartisan organization, that we can make sure that we get as many people as possible to buy into this effort, that we can structure our folks to have a set of principles, and that we can demonstrate, like others have in the past, that we have the wherewithal to impact and to change elections. Only then will we have the power, will we have the poder to make sure that policies that are implemented for our communities here and for those of us that live in the island that don't have the power to vote can get executed. This would not be a novelty. Our fellow Cuban Americans number 2.7 million in the United States. Yet they are very well organized. And they have the power to make changes in elections. They are considered a very important voting bloc when it comes to the presidency and when it comes to Congress. The NRA is well organized as well. And they establish policies as well. Puerto Ricans are 5.6 million strong in the United States. More so than either the NRA or our fellow Cuban Americans. But we have not been organized in one strong front ever before, and we have not gotten the vote in a structured fashion as we are proposing here. Now, I think that all of the ingredients are there now. I think that this devastation has united the people of Puerto Rico and the friends of Puerto Rico. I think that the resiliency and the heart that our people have shown has also cultivated that connection with the rest of our fellow Americans and with the rest of the world. And I think it is the right time to get this organization started and to make sure that everybody knows that come midterm elections 2018, Puerto Ricans will not only be part of the vote, they will be determining outcomes in the 2018 midterm elections.
Yes.
So this is what we're committed. So this is what we're committed to do, and this is what we're starting here today. Now, I'm only one spokesperson. This is a community effort. There is no ownership. The ownership has to be of the people of Puerto Rico. And I am proud to say that we have leaders that have stood up in Luis Figueroa over here in Puerto Rico, in Florida, and in the rest of the nation will be leading this effort. And Rinaldi as well will be leading the effort in Texas and all throughout critical states around the nation. We will be getting organized, working to get folks registered, getting the vote out, establishing what the priorities are, and making sure we have an impact on those elections.
Yes.
So today we announced that we have a platform, a digital platform that will be novel, poderpuertorico.org. It will allow folks to get registered. It will allow us to have a database so that we can get organized. And it will allow us to start calculating how many more we need so that we can influence elections here in Florida and everywhere else in the nation. Now, this is a long-term project. It is not a short-term objective, but needs to be clear that we have a midterm elections a couple of months down the road. So we want to get as organized as possible to impact those elections, but always maintaining the vision that this is not just something for this election cycle or for the next, but it's actually something that we can pass along to future generations and demonstrate and safeguard what the best interests of the people of Puerto Rico are. We start here in Florida because Florida is the critical spot, is the principal determinant. As many people say, as Florida goes, so goes the nation. And in the I-4 corridor and everywhere else in Florida, there are over 500,000 registered Puerto Ricans that should have a say about how the nation goes. There are almost 40% of unregistered Puerto Ricans that should have a right to say how the nation goes. There are many across the nation in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, California, Virginia, that should have the same platform and the same opportunity. So with this leadership that we are establishing right now, they will make sure that they do the following. Number one, that they go to all of the community activities that we have, and that they can take the platform to register with young voters, with old voters, with everybody. And we can make sure that everybody is scheduled and registered to vote. Number two, that we can work closely with non-for-profit organizations so that we can have broader outreach, and that we can peg all of those networks that our fellow Puerto Ricans have over here, and make sure that we use them as effectively towards building a strong coalition for the midterm elections. Number three, giving this couple of months the opportunity for anybody and everybody that wants to demonstrate that they're friends of Puerto Rico to do so. And within their elections, they can showcase what their positions are in Puerto Rico so that we can act upon their actions and we can act upon their words moving forward. And lastly, making sure that in Florida and in some of those other critical states, we have the wherewithal to mobilize, to execute, and to influence elections significantly. If you take a look at Florida in the past decade, the margins of victory have been anywhere from 1.2% to 0.7%. 3.8 50% of those voters are Puerto Rican. Almost 300,000 Puerto Ricans came, mostly to Florida, after the storm. And if those are registered and ready to be our voice, they can flip midterm elections, and they can, down the road, flip presidential elections as well. So what we're doing here is setting up the basis, setting up the strategy, making sure that we have a framework that's effective moving forward, recognizing that we're not going to be able to do it all at once, but that we're starting with the right foot, with the right people, with a commitment to openness, with the recognition that this is not a partisan effort, this is a Puerto Rico first effort. And once we do that, we will demonstrate, not only on one election cycle or the other, but continuously, that the asks of the policy, the vision, the commitments, the wants of the people of Puerto Rico, not only in the United States, but also in the island, that they also have their dreams achieved. I have great aspirations, as I'm sure you all do, for Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico just went through a significant, devastating event. But we need to take that event and flip it into an opportunity. We need to make sure that all of those things that drew us down in the past, that put us in the level of second-class citizenship, that made a promesa structure had to be implemented in Puerto Rico, that limit our power moving forward, that we can erase all of that, and that we can start building stronger than ever before. I foresee a Puerto Rico that can be a destination of the human cloud, where in the future, many of the jobs are going to be geographically independent, and that people are just going to want to go to the place where they can have the best quality of life. And my hope is that Puerto Rico can be that place. I can see a Puerto Rico that becomes the natural connector of the Americas, with our cultural connection to Latin America and to the United States, be that bridge that makes our hemisphere even more stronger. I can see a Puerto Rico that has and gives access to all of its citizens to quality health care, to a proper world-class education that doesn't see a divide between those that have the money to get that education and those that don't, but that allows everybody to grow to the optimal of their capabilities. I see a Puerto Rico that can become a platform and leapfrog from probably one of the worst energy infrastructures in the Western Hemisphere to being one that's a model across the world, where the customer is the center of the action, where renewables are the major part of our generation, where we could be sustainable, cost-effective, and a driver of economic growth. I see all of these things that are possible for Puerto Rico. Some might say they're moonshots. I say they are an opportunity if we stand up, if we do things right in the island, and if we execute over here in the United States. So my petition to all of you, all of the Puerto Ricanos and all of the friends of Puerto Ricans that are here in the United States, let's build this structure. Let's make it strong. Let's fight for the policies that we believe in. Let's make sure that there's accountability if others don't act upon those commitments. Let's make sure that we establish and pave a path forward to a brighter future for our communities here and for the communities down in Puerto Rico. Lastly, I would say that this commitment is very personal to me, and the reason is I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 5-month-old boy. And my hope is that they can live in Puerto Rico if they choose to, or anywhere else if they choose to, but that they can have the same rights in the island that they would have over here, that they can have access to quality education no matter where they go, that they could get a world-class healthcare service if they need it, that if they prepare themselves, they can have an honest and a decent job, that if they walk the streets, they're safe. That is the aspiration that we have. And if we bind together, if we organize, if we demonstrate to the rest of the U.S. citizens that live in the United States that Puerto Ricans are a force to be reckoned with, that we will define elections, that we have political power. The sky is the limit for us. And as we say in Puerto Rico, un mejor Puerto Rico será posible. Thank you very much, and God bless you.